Morning, everybody. I've opted for the Madonna mic today, but I promise you I'm not going to sing. I will not put you through that pain. Thank you for such a wonderful introduction, Wayne, and it's so lovely to be here. I arrived last night, and I've had such a wonderful welcome throughout. So I'm here to talk about collaboration. Isn't that exciting? But let me be clear, I'm very experienced in collaboration, I think, over 25 years, but I'm still reluctant to call myself an expert. Collaboration is an art and not a science, and I think that's really important. It evolves, it reshapes constantly, but I think that is what makes it so exciting. So maybe that makes us all more of artistes rather than experts when we're thinking about collaboration. It means we must adapt, we must change, we must learn, but almost importantly, we must unlearn along the way as well. And I hope some of my experience will be useful. If it's not, then just don't come and talk to me later. And as some points to consider, and maybe a head scratch over. I like being able to head scratch. Particularly at a time, when we've already heard, resources are tightening, when it can feel like we're being pitted against each other sometimes, and that there are more time and energy pressures on us all than we've seen at any other time before. So the following words of, and feel free to insert whatever adjective you like for the next 10 minutes or so, will draw on the elements that I've found useful along the way. And critically, the words trust and confidence are what I want to start with. I think they are the fundamentals of what will drive any successful partnership or collaboration. They are the words my very first boss in the LGBT sector on my very first day. He walked into the office and said, if you can get trust and confidence nailed, it'll help everything else you do in your professional life. I remember sat there because he literally walked out of the office 10 minutes later and said, there you go, there's your desk, get on with your job. And I kind of pondered over it for a while and questioned it. But here I am 25 years later talking about trust and confidence. So he did a pretty good job. If we have trust in those that we look to work with, then it will give us the confidence to know that we can do well together and that the intentions are the right ones. So I ask you to keep those two words in mind as a lens through everything else that I'm going to talk about. So it brings me to caution and nervousness. Collaboration brings with it many emotions. It's working with people, it's working with organizations, and that's a natural and important part of it. So approach things with caution at times, and there's always going to be that sense of nervousness, but don't let them become barriers. Think back to that trust and confidence. Flip the caution, flip that nervousness, and turn it into trust and confidence instead. Innovation rarely comes from a place of safety. It needs that bravery, it needs that way of leaning into the nerves and the caution to see what might be possible. And then how do we build and we maintain relationships? News for everybody, we don't all have to like each other. Of course, it'd be nice if we did, but that's just not the way of the world. And, I recognize that. We're all different. We want and need different things, whether that's as individuals, whether that's as organization, whether that's as communities. However, that doesn't mean that we still can't collaborate with each other. And in fact, actually, sometimes those differences are what help us bring together something unique that other collaborations might not ever able to be offered, providing you both have similar principles. So can we lean into those differences? Can we recognize that they exist, but look for those golden moments of where we can agree to achieve amazing things? By getting to know each other, by learning how each of our organizations work, we can, of course, pinpoint those that we would ultimately like to work with and who we can naturally build and maintain relationships with, because it's always easier to drive change with those who are driven by those same goals. And so by exploring the challenging, the unknown, what unique results might we be able to produce together? And that brings me to moving with urgency, but in equitable ways. Quite a mouthful. So we've all seen it. An opportunity arises. Wonderful. And then you look at all the details and you've got precisely 10 minutes to produce everything. Working out who your partners are, who's going to get what money, and how you pull together an entire project plan. Obviously, 10 minutes is a bit of a jest, but the point remains, time is usually short. And with that, then there is the need for expediency, but I encourage you, don't do this at the expense of working in fair, just, and equitable ways. Different partners will all have different needs and differing amounts of capacity. And smaller grassroots organisations, and when I say smaller, I caveat with, I know that we're all relatively small, but those, when we compare ourselves to the really, really, really big players, so I mean those with staffed capacity. So those smaller organisations are likely to need that little bit more time to consult with other volunteers, with their directors, to see if they can engage, is this the right opportunity for them, and to provide you with what's needed. So we must continue to challenge ourselves on how we support those smaller organisations in the process so we can create parity, to increase the opportunities for collaborations with those we wouldn't ordinarily think about working with. So let's consider the needs of those different size organisations and not fall into that one-size-fits-all pattern. And of course, there's pragmatism in that as well. Sometimes when collaborations are what we want to do, but we're forced into unreasonable timeframes, then we have to accept sometimes it might not be possible in that instant. But what can we take from those experiences is about questioning who isn't around our tables. Let's be curious. Let's get outside our comfort zone and do something different. Sometimes expediency creates an environment of competition versus collaboration. Sure, that's not the first time we've heard that. And actually, sometimes that's okay. That's fine. Some things will be competitive. Let's recognize that. Let's name it. But how do we change the system so we build something that's better fit for the future? If we put the hard work in now, looking for potential new partners for the future, can we make the system work for us and those we serve, not the other way around? And I'll go back to who isn't around our tables already. How can we change that so we've got a greater chance of being able to respond in the best ways to those new opportunities, and we don't always have to go into the, we've got 10 minutes, let's go into panic mode. Values and principles. Of course, I do agree, I do believe that all of the above of what I've said can only work together with those that fit your own organization's values and principles. There will likely be organizations that don't work or want to work how you work. So focus your energy on those where those values and principles best align, although stay curious as to, is that just a perception that you have and there's work to be done to build those new connections, or is that reality? Having principles that guide your collaborations not only supports bringing together of good partnerships and collaborations, they also provide a really good backbone for maintaining them. And with good principles set, sometimes things still won't go right. Something will likely go wrong. But you'll be grateful for having something that you can lean in on with those agreed values and principles to help navigate those complicated situations. So from co-design to co-delivery and beyond. I feel a bit like Buzz Lightyear when I say that from Toy Story. When I say it, but if you put the building blocks in place for good relationships, recognizing tensions, exploring shared principles, we can go from passive collaborations to true co-design, co-delivery and beyond. Believe it or not, I am actually socially introverted, but I challenge myself as often as I can to look at what I'm not attending, where might I go to meet someone new, a new organization I haven't worked with before. So I'm constantly looking at people who aren't around my current table. And I use this to keep me in that mindset of equity, of doing differently, and opening up new opportunities that build the potential for new and exciting collaborations. You never know what's over the horizon, and when those new connections might be that golden moment for both organizations. So one thing I'm really passionate about is that we serve communities, not ourselves, not our organizations. We are simply custodians of our organizations. As humans, we do not sit in isolation across the various intricacies that make us who we are. Our diversities, our intersectionality, that's what makes us working in communities so exciting. So that means if we serve people and our communities, and our work can't sit in isolation, then we need to think beyond our own selves. And collaboration is therefore not only a good thing, not only is it exciting, sometimes terrifying, it's what we must do. And remember, it's an art, not a science. It needs testing, it needs learning, it needs unlearning, the head scratching, and importantly, that willingness to try. So I do leave you with some head scratching and some pondering for considering those future collaborations. What's your motivation for collaborating? Whose needs will those collaborations serve? And if either of those answers center on yourself or your organization alone, is it truly worthwhile going into that collaboration? And is it the right opportunity that's presenting itself? And why does this matter? Because we're here to save lives. We're here to serve. We're here to create better futures together. Collaborations bring together the magic of different organizations, creating that heady mix of innovation, determination, passion, activism, and the potential for incredible impact. And this creates something which is very attractive to those that we must woo along the way and influence to create the change that we know we want to see for our communities. So collaborations serve more than the sum of their parts and ultimately